Good morning. This is Ron. It is Tuesday the 19th. Welcome to Story Time. Thank you, thank you, thank you. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States of America, talking to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers. Okay, so I wanted to discuss briefly about private property, and what the underpinnings, the cultural underpinnings of private property, and how it applies to the left-right political and socio-political debate in this country. If you are one of the things that Karl Marx said when he made like his or communist manifesto was about the idea of superstructure and the idea that there's more to, as I've mentioned, being a capitalist or a communist than merely the political equation. Whoever's in power, that there is a whole culture that supports it. So one of the favorite tactics or strategies of the left is to attack American culture in an effort to bring American society, at least the capitalist part of it, down. So if you're looking to get rid of one of the things, if features of socialism is that there's very little private property. You might own chattels. You might own that which you can carry around in your pockets, but that's about it. Everything else is basically owned in common. So buildings, the house you live in or apartment you live in is not yours. It's owned in common by everybody. So if you're going to go ahead and you have a society in which people value private property, they want to have their own homes, their own cars, etc. How do you undermine that? How do you subvert that? One of the ways is to run around telling people, hey, you shouldn't want private property. You shouldn't want to have a car or a house or things. You could take it on head on. And you're going to find that it's going to be very difficult going psychologically and politically to get people to go along with the notion of that idea. They're going to resist. So if you stop and think, well, okay, because if I just bang my head against this stone wall, eventually I suppose I can get it to come down, but it's going to take a whole long time and it's going to be rather painful and awkward in the meantime. So how do I go ahead and get this barrier dissolved without having to spend as much time and energy? And the answer is, of course, psychology. Use psychological tools, techniques to go ahead and get people to voluntarily change their mind about private property. So in order to do that, you got to find out, well, what's the cultural underpinning of private property? What's the purpose of having private property? Why does anybody need their own house or their own car? And the answer is expectation of privacy. That as long as people have expectations of privacy, they will also expect to have their own property so that they can meet their privacy needs. So the left is going to go ahead and subvert that expectation of privacy in order to get people to voluntarily give up the notion, to psychologically get to the point where they believe that there really is no such thing as privacy. It just doesn't exist. It's a fiction, and everything is public and for public consumption. And once you get to that point, then the way is clear for the left-wing politicians to start going ahead and putting up public housing in which it's not privately owned. You just move in. You don't have to pay for it. But at the same time, you have no expectation of privacy. You're basically socializing the society. You're taking away private property and doing it with people's permission instead of forcing it on them. Instead of having an armed struggle revolution, the Trotskyites end up taking over the government and then forcing all the regular citizens to live in communal housing. You go ahead and get the people to want it. and then you just simply have to do is have a mayor or any other political leader just stand up and say, "Hey, guess what? It's time that we had community property." And people will simply go along with it. That's basically what happened in Venezuela. It's also what happened in Nazi Germany. How did Nazi Germany go from being a republic to being a national socialist country? Because the Nazis were able to affect the culture of the country. The people of Nazi Germany were Nazis long before the Nazis actually took power and long before Hitler began ruling by decree and actually taking over all of the the political apparatus. Because if that had not been the case, and as Hitler found out when they tried to stage a putsch in 1933, was that he didn't have the support of the people. It was the putsch was put down. Everybody was put in jail. Many of them were ended up getting killed, and it was a failure. And so that's when he realized if he's going to succeed, he has to own the culture. He has to get in people's psyche. And once he's done that, he can do whatever he wants. The rest of it is a piece of cake. And the same thing goes here in the United States. You're going to get a lot of people, and the way they're going to do it, technique-wise or technique-wise, is to simply come up and start asking you bold questions. It might be something like, "Hey, you didn't vote for Donald Trump, did you? You're not a Trump supporter, are you?" Those are a couple of questions which are none of your damn business. It's a privacy issue. Who I vote for, we vote in booths, we vote in secret, and do so because we have an expectation of privacy. But by going up and just walking up and boldly asking you, "Hey, you're not a Trump supporter, are you?" Then they're getting you because they do it very boldly. It's with the left. How they do it is as important as what they do. So if they're going to ask you the question, being able to ask the question in a very offhand manner, as though it's perfectly natural and normal for people to invade your privacy and ask you rude questions like, "Who did you vote for? What kind of underwear do you have on?" Or whatever kinds of questions that are just or they can do it the opposite way too. I've had that happen to me too, where a lefty will walk up to me and just announce tell me something, some intimate detail of their life I really don't want to know. They might be telling me about their hemorrhoids or something like that, but they do it with the expectation that if they're sharing something deeply personal about themselves, that I'm going to feel uncomfortable and remain uncomfortable until I share something personal and private about myself. And once I start doing that, then again, we have a situation where I'm voluntarily giving up my privacy. And if this keeps happening, people, one after the other, these lefties come up to you and just very casually invade your privacy and expect you to give up personal details about your life. After a certain point, you're going to get to the point where you're thinking, well, there really is no privacy, is there? Everything is just basically out in the open. And so then when the mayor says, "Guess what? We're going to take over your apartment building or your condominium complex. You're not going to have to pay rent anymore or pay a lease or a mortgage because we're going to go ahead. The city's going to own it. It's going to be owned in common." You're just going to shrug your shoulders and say, "Okay," because it seems natural. Because after all, what do I need private property for if I have no expectation of privacy? Which brings me to a side point. There's a lot of arguments about the right to privacy. I know of nowhere in which there is written or explained any right to privacy, not in natural law, not in the Constitution that God has granted us, a right to privacy that the Constitution thereby guarantees. It's not written anywhere. I think it may be inferred or implied by and inferred by whoever reads the Constitution that there is privacy, or at least the expectation of privacy. So I prefer expectation of privacy versus the right to privacy. avoids an argument that I think is really pointless. So, but again, you got to look for that kind of thing when you're dealing with people, the lefties in your life, the your relatives, your friends, your coworkers, and look for them to get, especially, and you're going to find out when you're asked a question, you feel uncomfortable. Don't dismiss that feeling. Don't say, "Well, that's just me. I've got some kind of weird hang-ups." Give yourself the benefit of the doubt. If you feel uncomfortable with the question, it's probably because there's something wrong with the question, and there's probably something wrong with the questioner. Again, it's not so much asking, what are they saying, the left? You're asking, what are they doing? And in this particular case, they're subverting and undermining the expectation of privacy. Okay, when I come back, it's going to be, I'm going to read from the 1993 interview of Playboy with Rush Limbaugh. All right, thank you very much. And I'm going to be reading from the continuing on with the 1993 interview of Rush Limbaugh, make a couple of comments. Let's see, where we left it off was basically Playboy was slapping Mr. Limbaugh around about his views on drug legalization, more specifically about marijuana, and basically trying to make him look like a hypocrite. Playboy, if you had been caught using it, do you feel marijuana? Do you feel that you should have taken penalties, that you are committing a crime sufficient to require incarceration? Limbaugh, well, no, because I'm a conservative and I was doing it on an experimental basis. And I didn't go past the 3 mile limit to do it, but no, I had been. Look, I'm not going to be trapped here. Playboy, you're not known for being intimidated about expressing your opinions, but lately you've softened the edge on your commentary and gaze. True? Okay, now, Playboy has just gone ahead and changed the subject. They've gone on to something else. They were pretty dogged about going after Mr. Limbaugh on the marijuana situation. They stopped doing that and went ahead on to the next subject because they've got their goal, okay, which was to make Rush Limbaugh look contradictory and hypocritical on the issue of drugs. Once they've succeeded with that, there's no reason to keep beating a dead horse. We move on to the next subject and try beating them up on the new subject, which in this case is going to be about homosexuality. Okay, Limbaugh, there's no question I've done that. My edge, as you call it, with regard to homosexuality, dealt with one 4-week period when I was moved, outraged, by an ACT UP, which stands for AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power, protest at St. Patrick's Cathedral, in which a mass was, I don't want to say infiltrated, disrupted. Condoms were thrown. The host was desecrated. A number of insulting words were said, and threatening behavior took place. So I followed this with a commentary that, in essence, said, please take your behavior and leave it out of the church. And then I engaged in an AIDS update that missed the mark totally and ended up being very insensitive to people who were dying. That was not the purpose of it, and I stopped it after a month. And on several occasions since then, on national television, on radio, and so forth, I have apologized for it. But still it survives in the minds of gay activists who I think love enemies. I mean, I think they utilize enemies well. They need them. Playboy, do you think homosexuality is a matter of choice, or is it preordained genetically and psychologically? Limbaugh, I'm inclined to believe that it is not an active choice. I do think that if you get a hold of people young enough and attempt to sway them, that homosexuality can be steered into them. I just don't see how it can be a choice. I know plenty of gay people, and they all insist that it wasn't. Some of my most ardent supporters think I'm being conned because I don't realize that these are perverts seeking to be perverts. But I just don't know too many people who seek to be perverts. It would certainly not be the most popular choice one can make in life. And again, so here's Playboy leading Mr. Limbaugh to water, and basically he's drinking. So the question, do you think homosexuality is a matter of choice or preordained? Now, the key word in there is think. What they're asking for is an opinion. They're not asking for facts. They're asking for your opinion. Once you concede and go ahead and start giving your opinion, then you're lost. The way the question should have been phrased and what Mr. Limbaugh should have done is rephrase the question. Say, sorry, the wrong question. Right question is homosexuality a matter of choice, or is it preordained genetically and psychologically? Now, back in 1993, then the answer to that question would be there is no scientific evidence that gays are preordained psychologically, biologically, or any other way to be gay. There's no evidence of it. Therefore, it must be a choice, a lifestyle choice. That would be the correct answer. Now, it brings us to today. Today, we have people that are, and this wouldn't even be happening 20, 30 years ago, but we have same-sex marriages that are issues, and many others surrounding homosexuality. And the reason for it was because of one simple supposed medical study. I've never seen it. I've never read it. I don't even know what school. I assume it was a college that did it, but I don't even know who did it. All I remember is that there was a big deal in the news years ago about this particular study that supposedly proved that gays are gay because they're born that way. Uh, how they're going to do that, figure that out, I don't know. I wouldn't think that you would be able to. You're going to point to a gene and say, okay, this is the gay gene. I don't know. That sounds kind of shady to me. I think it was more of a socio-political stunt that sympathetic researchers were involved in a study that was rigged or geared to be slanted in a particular direction, and but anyways, the point is, once they had that study, they went to court with it. They got a court to recognize it. Once the courts recognize it, everything else falls into place. Because if being gay is a lifestyle choice, then there's no such thing as a right to have a same-sex weddings and all of the other things that have been falling into place socio-politically lately in regards to being gay. Excuse me. So, if turns out that it is a biological, there is some kind of a gene or something that predisposes people to be gay, then of course, then now the issue is similar to being black. Okay, you're born black, you're born white. There's nothing you can do about it, and so you cannot be denied certain basics simply because of, in essence, who you are. But the problem is, again, nobody challenged this study on the right. This is, again, where the right aids and abets the left. This study was allowed to stand and still allowed to stand. And then now, all the people on the right are now saying, oh, well, wait a minute, I don't want to bake a cake for a same-sex couple. Too late. Too late. If you claim to be, the rule is if you're a public place, and by the way, the Supreme Court has come down on this decision and they did it wrong, is that if you're a public place, you're serving the public, you don't get to say we don't serve gays, right? You can't, Target can't say, hey, we're open to the public, and then say, but by the way, no blacks allowed. That's the law. You can't do that. If you want to do that kind of thing, you want to be discriminatory, then you can do it on the basis of membership, and you have membership places that sell memberships. But again, if you're selling memberships to the general public, you can't say, well, I'll sell memberships to white people, but not to blacks or not to gays or whatever. So that's where the cake people were at. If you're open to the public and they want you to say, Fred and Joe come in and say, hi, we're getting married, we want a wedding cake, you got to do it. Now, the line is, if Fred and Joe say, not only do we want a cake, but we want your endorsement. We want you to put in icing, some writing or whatever that says, with love from Bill's Cake Factory. Okay, that's going over the line. Okay, just simply baking a cake for a same-sex couple is not an endorsement of the of that. It's not baking a cake for anybody is not an endorsement of their activities, whatever that happens to be. Okay, people may get a cake and baking it for people for as a joke or a gag, and just because you bake that cake doesn't mean that you're part of the joke. You're in on the joke or in on the gag. Okay, it's not an expression of solidarity with the people that are buying it, unless again there's something specific. If you're required to again write an icing or do something like that that says that Joe's Bake Shop loves gay weddings or same-sex marriages, that's different. Then you have the right to say, no, I'm not going to do that. I'll bake you the cake, but I'm not going to make an endorsement of this particular activity. That would have been the way to handle this. And it also goes into situations where how was this particular bakery singled out for this lawsuit? And it's very easy. They don't have to go very far. They don't have to go like bakery to bakery to bakery looking for religious Christians to sue. All they have to do is look in the yellow pages or go on the internet and look up bakers. And very often, what Christians will do, and it's really foolish, is they'll put a fish, the little fish symbol, on their website. And they used to do it in the same thing in the Yellow Pages. You'd go through the Yellow Pages looking, and some of the businesses, and it might be mechanics, will have the little fish symbol. So that tells you they're Christian. Hi, I'm a Christian. Hi, I'm a Christian. So it's not very hard for gay activists to find somebody to sue. Hey, look at this guy. He's got the fish. He's Christian. Boom. That's where we're going to go to get a cake. And so don't be foolish. You don't need to put a little fish symbol. We don't live in Rome. We don't have people yet, although sometimes it seems like it's getting to that point, that are going to put you on the cross and crucify you for being a Christian. You don't have to have secret codes and things like that. You can be a Christian person, and you don't have to, again, engage in like code word type uh, activity. You don't have to do that. Just have a regular business, and then you know you're probably going to find that it's a lot fewer lawsuits that way. Anyways, so when I come back, I'm going to be reading from the New York cab drivers, New York City cab drivers joke book. Thank you very much. And this is the New York City Cab Driver's Joke Book by Jim Peach, who is an actual New York City cabbie. A Jew, a Greek, and an Italian man all die in a plane crash. They're standing before the Lord, and the Lord tells them, I'm going to give you all one more chance. I'm going to send you back to the earth on one condition, that you all give up your bad habits. They all say, we will. Please let us live again. The Italian agrees to give up eating compulsively. The Jewish man promises not to think about money all the time, and the Greek man vows not to constantly think about sex. Suddenly, they find themselves back on Earth, walking down a street. Before they even get a chance to say anything to each other about what has happened, the Italian man sees a restaurant and begins to salivate. He starts running to the restaurant when, poof, he disappears in a cloud of smoke. Just then the Jewish man sees a dime on the street a couple of feet away. He steps forward, bends over to pick it up, and poof, both he and the Greek disappear. This joke was circulating during a particularly dismal summer for the Yankees. What do Michael Jackson and the New York Yankees have in common? They both wear one glove for no apparent reason. And on that note, we end another episode of Story Time. I thank you for joining me, and have a great day.